Okay, so since we're already running late out of time, I just I'm gonna do a small introduction to the participants. And before I do that, of course, you need to sign this participant list so that we can get all your data and monitor you and stuff like that. So I'm just kidding, of course, but you can pass this through the public, please. Okay, so the second thing, the merch is here. If you want it, you just take it. There's some badges and some stuff. So with that all being said, we're finally said and done. Okay, we can begin. So we don't have any particular order in which we wanted to speak. So I'll just announce you from left to right, basically. Yeah. So on my left side is Ramón Blacázar. He comes... Blacázar. Okay. So, thanks. So Ramón Blacázar comes from Chile. He has experience in fighting lithium extraction in the Atacama desert of Chile. You were also active in Bolivia. You do your PhD on this, and you also run a plurinational observatory in the Andean salt flats. So Ramón is your guy from Latin America, and he will explain everything. Cheila Collaço Rodrigues, our second contestant for the evening. So, yeah, we're gonna fight. It's gonna be fucking bloody. So basically, and also you see I'm not normal, so fuck it. Anyway, so Cheila Collaço Rodrigues, she's a poet from the mountains of Portugal, who's 1/4 of Portugal's territory is actually under attack. She brought some maps. She can show you. Yeah, and there's some maps. Yeah. Okay, later we're going to have some maps. It's, basically also a case of mass protests in Portugal, who happened to view Serbia with this, yeah, they hope to be like Serbia, so we'll see how that goes. And on my right side is Bojana Novaković, who you may know from Marš Drine movement, and she was one of the key players here. Marš Drine is also our partner in organizing all of this, and so far it has been, beautiful, emotional, good, bad, and everything else. And it was like one of the ideas behind this, why we're doing this together. We want to sign something that's called the Jadar Declaration. That's going to bring all of these people from different countries to unite in one single network against lithium mining in the world. And this is why we wanted to present this here, And one of the reasons why we chose Crni Ovan, and I wanted also to say this, because here Crni Ovan was attacked by fascists, and this is not the first fascist attack, of course, in Novi Sad, and in Bosnia, and in other countries here recently, and so this is our form of expressing solidarity. Anyways, so this is why we are also here. It's not only to present you something, but also to be here. And on my further right side is Lola Winter. So she was our new contestant here. She comes from Germany, from an organization called Sand in Getriebe, which has now started to fight also again against the Tesla factory in Brandenburg, Berlin, which maybe it's not that known here, but this Tesla factory will be importing lithium from all over the world, and it has already wanted to do so. People from Czech and Poland are regularly imported here for this factory. It doesn't have even windows. There was an explosion there, and this is not even known that much in other countries. So the idea was to bring other people here and connect lithium struggles from all these individual countries. I won't go into much detail. I've already spoken that much. So maybe we, yes. Okay. Yeah, sorry for this technical whatever. Yeah, okay, whatever. The idea also here is to be a bit more informal, so as you can see. So we don't want to have lectures or something like that. Basically, my first question to all of you guys here would be how you envision this green transition. What's the problem with the idea of green transition? So the media tells us, okay, this is something nice, lovely, green. What's the problem? Why should there be any problem here? So, and it turns out there are a lot of problems, in the countries where we all come from. So I wanted to ask maybe first Bojana, since you come from Serbia, so people will know our problems the most. So this is something that's, people here know our struggles with lithium. So maybe I'm gonna ask you, how do you envisage these green transitions? What do you see as problems with the green transition, and how did you enter into all of these struggles against lithium mining? So here we go.
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay. Hi, ćao. Vrlo mi je čudno pričam na engleskom u Srbiji, ali dobro. So you asked me a lot of questions, but I'll stick to the green transition question. I don't know how informed people here are, so I'm going to speak very basically. So if you feel like I'm talking down to your intelligence, but our experience of with Marš and my personal experience with the green transition, of course, started when we started organising particular activities against Rio Tinto's development of this Jadar project. And it became very clear that the green transition was a marketing tool, in fact a marketing phrase, sort of usurped by corporate occupational forces around the world to be able to keep going with their growing their profits under the guise of environmentally friendly activity. But really it's sort of a code for we'll keep making profit, it just won't look the same and it won't use fossil fuels, and there's going to be these sacrifice zones. And it's really interesting to me that the green transition sort of allows for these sacrifice zones of agricultural land or even desert areas which then dry up water sources from surrounding cities, but they don't talk about sacrificing billionaire ships or profits or consumption or production, or like there's literally no talking about sacrifice zones in order for us to transition being about the system that got us into that problem in the first place. And I think my experience with Rio Tinto definitely in terms of the marketing side of it, and it really is for me a marketing thing, is that you know, it's a really good excuse to keep the car industry going and actually growing. Just a small scientific fact, an electric car takes 7 times the minerals of a conventional gas car. And wind turbines, I think, take 9 times the minerals. So when shareholders hear that, they're like, this is the best thing we can invest in, because this green transition is going to make us even more money. Because these minerals are kind of scarce and they're expensive, and if we get in this right now, we can say we're environmentally friendly, plus we can make a hell of a lot of money. So I think that's all I need to say, because I'm sure everybody else will say things that I want to say as well, and I'd love to them.
Yeah, okay, so maybe then, Ramón, can you elaborate a little bit on the green transition? Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for the invitation and organization and this attendance. So the green transition is also interesting to hear about from Latin America, because it's a transition that it's for others. You know, it's not as if electric cars was gonna be used in Chile, Argentina, or Bolivia whatsoever, and especially not in the territories where lithium comes from. So this is, I think, one of the main contradictions that we see in this global scale. I'd like to also add that these territories, in way we are called also the Plurinational Observatory of Andean Salt Flats, it's because we kind of like realized that the green sacrifice zones are these ecosystems and all the life actually that is within and around. And in these territories, what we see, it's a very, very special and endangered wildlife, but also and especially indigenous communities. So I moved to San Pedro de Atacama and realized about this issue, working mostly on agroecology and kind of like other alternatives to the crisis. But suddenly extractivism started to expand, and it felt like something that was menacing not only the possibilities for life, but also the possibilities for a transition for our own. And that's what is going on in Latin America, but now also in Mexico, and in other territories in Quebec, in Canada, in Nevada Desert, in the US, of course here in Serbia. So yeah, so I think that this invention of the green transition comes also out of the countries that are the most pollutant countries in the world, like in the present day, but also historically, like the countries that benefited from what's called the Industrial Revolution, right? Are the countries that colonized the rest of the planet to extract coal and minerals and so on. And today, these very countries are the ones that are telling the rest of the world, who are the victims of this development model, actually, colonial, of course, how to kind of like transition, as you say, right? So it's very contradictory. Like, it's not a transition for ours in the peripheries of the world, not only like global north, global south, but also in Europe. There is an eastern periphery, there is a southern periphery. Within these countries, you have like rural peripheries. In our case, it's rural and indigenous periphery, so you have like even more like vulnerabilities, because in some cases, like indigenous peoples have not been recognized by the state. That's something that is changing in Chile if the new constitution is approved. But for the first time in more than 200 years, indigenous peoples will be recognized. In some countries, like in Bolivia, for example, where they are recognized, they are not properly consulted anyways. So I think that, yeah, you have this problem of the dependence, we have the problem of coloniality of this ideal of transition, which we call a corporate energy transition, to make it clear that it's a corporate-led or a business-led transition, right? So yeah, so from the south, I think that something interesting is the response from the ground and from the grassroots movements, indigenous communities, rural communities, social movements, also critical academia, and we are trying to not only criticize extractivism as a development model that is made out of relations, but also like to say that we also have the right to create and to think and imagine other transitions that are deeper and will kind of like take us out of this this capitalist hole that is like today getting even worse, actually. As you say, like the more minerals will be needed. It's kind of like, according to this is a very corporate institution, so it's a very critical perspective out of it, but the International Energy Agency, it's predicts that we will need, we as humanity, let's say, it's not for all humans, of course, the problem of Anthropocene and Capitalocene. But yeah, so capitalism, let's say, green capitalism will need more minerals than all the minerals that have ever been extracted in history, for a transition that has like as a deadline 2050. So this is like really like astonishing, and it's good. It's encouraging that we're doing this. So thanks for hearing us.
Hi. So actually, it was a good point, Ramon, that you brought this, because it was actually what I wanted to state. Because in my country, in Portugal, that is exactly the situation. Our government has, this to explain also the green transition, but has issued a plan for the exploration of 30 different minerals, but lithium is the great flag for this program. They don't talk about the rest of these minerals, they only talk about lithium, because they know that lithium is a great flag for this green transition and this great marketing attack that we are all suffering. All of our countries are actually suffering. And so actually when people say that, well, it's better to have mines in Europe because people have more rights and workers have more rights in Europe, what they don't tell you is that a battery of lithium will need cobalt. And cobalt, for example, will come from Africa, where kids are mining on these mines. So actually we have this makeup operation regarding lithium. And so we have these top-bottom decisions that are now being made, for example, in the European Union, that enable capitalism to continue. So we are going to destroy what is left of our biodiversity, well, just to make the cities continue with their way of living, and the rural areas and the indigenous areas are going to be the sacrificial areas. And for example, in the European context, we have a huge automobile park that is owned by the two biggest potencies of Europe, which is France and Germany. And they have this need to, well, transition their cars. So for them to continue with their business. In Serbia, farmers are going to lose their lands. They're not, because we're not going to let them, but do it. And in Portugal, the same. For example, in the north of the country, where there is this area called Barroso, it's one of the most known areas that are under attack. We are talking about an area that has still communal living, farmers with communal living, an area that has more than 60% of the biodiversity of the country, for example, and that people actually are going to be expropriated if the Portuguese public don't wake up to this great danger that we are living. So I think as a species at this moment, either we follow what the big institutions are telling us to do, or we can at least dream another world. And for me, in my opinion, and of many other people, it will have to be degrowth. Degrowth can't be co-opted, because capitalism is based on exponential growth. And even, I think, a little kid can understand that you can't have exponential growth on a planet that has limited resources. It's so simple, right? It seems so simple. So I think we should use the word degrowth because it can't be co-opted. They will never use this word. They will never use this word. And we have to, besides degrowth, we have to talk about ecofeminism, for example. We have to talk about all the things that have been shunned until now, and that have been, classified as radical. We are not radicals. We want to live.
Okay, this is a powerful boom punchline. Okay, so maybe Lulu. So you come from Germany, and usually when people talk about this, they talk about big countries, colonizing little countries. But then it turns out it's kind of also a problem in Germany, like with this Tesla factory, and the idea that somehow people or lands in Germany are okay is also something that we need to probe and question, because I was also personally in this factory before the explosion, and basically I was shocked. It looked to me like something that's built in Jagodina in Serbia by this guy, Dragan Marković Palma, the local capitalist. So he also looks like a capitalist, the bald guy. So basically, as I said, they didn't have even fucking windows. I think they had just one fire extinguisher, and when we went there was also police, and they destroyed some underground water. So I wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit on this, and maybe also what are your experiences in fighting against this? You can also comment on the green transition question, but I think that empirically people will be interested to hear what's going on in Germany with this.
I'm a bit nervous, but I try my very best. About the green transition, I can just agree with what the other people just said. And we have a lot of discussion about what? Sorry. Okay. I think the Tesla fabric that is very it has different sides. One side is that causes many problems to the area where the Tesla fabric is built, but also this neo-colonization problem that is still very big. So we are using resources that come from different countries, and they even though that they oh Jesus, okay. I just need a second to get into it. I think I just need to read. So I will just focus a bit on the green transition. Even though with the Tesla there's a lot of discussion about e-mobility or normal using regular cars, and I think right now in the public everyone knows that regular cars produce emissions, but it's not being talked about that e-mobility also has a lot of emissions, not this obvious, but there are where the resources come from. As Shay already said, they're coming from from Africa, from Congo, from different countries, and we are using like the financial power that Germany has to extract those products. So other countries are in like a lot of debt, and we are using this power that we have to extract the resources. So I think that is one of the biggest problems with this Tesla fabric. And also we can talk about like the problems that are like the local problems. As Brandenburg, where the Tesla fabric is built, it's already a very dry area. And it's built in a water protection area, so the water supply for the village is not really that secure, even though the fabric, they are assured that they will get all the water that they need, but not for the people living there. So that's also like a local problem. Also, like there's a lot of environmental damage going on. The fabric does not have a proper concept on how to prevent if like chemicals get out of the fabric. They don't have any proper concept of how to prevent the environment from getting damaged. Also,
Did they do an environmental impact assessment?
well, yeah, but I think it was.
They didn't have it in there. They didn't put it into the environmental. No, well, I was just asking whether they did an environmental impact assessment, because they would legally have to, according to European Union standards, they would have to put that into the impact assessment. So I'm really interested to understand how they missed that bit.
Yeah, well, they did, but there were a lot of like missing parts, and still they were able to build it. Like for example, they also
You still sort of be
Same in Portugal.
there was, for example, they would have needed like something like to put underneath the whole fabric. So if like chemicals dry out, so they won't ruin like the groundwater. But apparently they didn't. So and also like they started building the fabric without having the license to build there. So they invested already like 5 million euros into this fabric without being sure that they can like still being able to build it.
And this
So-
is in Berlin, sorry.
Yeah,
the heart of
it's in
Germany.
Berlin.
See, we're not alone. Serbia's not the worst. It happens in Germany, it happens in Portugal, it doesn't just happen to Serbians. We can get off our victim high horse. It happens everywhere to poor communities. I just needed to say that, guys. Please, we've got to stop whipping ourselves. Keep going. Thank you so much. This is amazing information. I can't
Yeah,
believe
but still, like, and still it's being used to create this image of, okay, we're getting like a green transition, and we are changing like our traffic into like green traffic, and but there's so many problems that are being like left out. And Tesla, they want, or they expect to be selling like 500,000 private cars. So that is not for the people who actually would need this. This is for the people who already have a lot of money, who can afford having a second or third car. But it's not for the people working and doing their every life business. So yeah, as Shay already said, we need a transition in like changing our way of thinking, like getting away from private cars, putting more effort into like public transport, or thinking about shared cars. And so like e-mobility is not the way of changing something like really sustainable. And also like we are profiting a lot from it, like the image of, we can use it for our image, but we are actually still exploiting other countries. We are using the resources that don't belong to us, and so we use this for our image. So that's really shitty.
Okay, so we actually have one hidden extra speaker tonight. Yeah, so it's Mirko Nikolić. There's so he's a colleague. He got here, so he is he's small. So anyways, like he's a colleague of Ramón in the Yes to Life No to Mining network. I hope he can hear us. His video. Oh, ciao Mirko, ciao.
Sorry,
So
Alex, could you just hit the recording?
yep, I can. Okay, so and here it is. Okay, please ask the host to give you the permission. Okay, so anyways, you can hear us, Mirko, well? Okay, can you talk?
You want me?
Oh,
You want me
okay.
to put you to allow you to record? So I didn't get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're a co-host. I think you should do it. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Try now. I think. Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Трябва свима
okay,
нови сад.
yeah, very cool. Just like one
Извините, ще
question.
се с вама. Желал би, so I'll switch to English. So actually, I'm from Belgrade originally, and now I'm live and work. My family is in Sweden, and well, I'll tie to what's been said. I'll speak a bit more about Sweden or North Europe to tie in with the Portuguese and German situation, because Serbia also you know much better, but I'm involved both here and. In North Europe, so what's going on in Sweden is like, actually, I'll give you an example. So, yeah, Sweden is in the middle of the great energy, all transitions possible, you know. But of course, the reason why I'm not here there with you is actually because a train was delayed, a 4-hour train was delayed, the 2 hours, and then in Germany I was delayed as well. So actually, trains don't work. And so, you know, like the train system, which is not public anymore, it used to be, but anyways, like, you know, something 200 years old is not really working so well. However, now, like, since a few months, Sweden is selling more electric cars than other vehicles already. So, you know, it's going great. Like,
So trains don't work.
you know,
in
this
Europe.
is an example really of what we should reclaim. You know, that actually public service and infrastructure is not working, and actually even these very arguably rich and countries, actually due to the decades of extreme neoliberalization, are actually now starting to really fall apart in terms of public services, and we've seen this. There is a social crisis in terms of welfare and so forth. But I'll stick with the green transition issue. So we have a big factory being built in Skellefteå by Northvolt, and it's going to be the biggest giga mega factory in Europe at the moment. And actually, just to give you a sense of scale, I'm not an expert, I don't know the exact numbers, but only this one factory, and there is now 2 more being built by the same company in Sweden, and there should be dozens more in Europe by 2030 and 2050. So this one factory in North Sweden that's being built now would use something around 10% of all global lithium produced at the moment when it starts running up. And likewise, cobalt, I don't know how many percent. So one factory. Interestingly, of course, is that actually the construction has already been mired in controversy, because actually there's been labor violation, there have been like black labor and so forth. Of course, it's all been subcontractors, but I would say situation is a bit like a Linglong factory and North Sweden. And another crucial element is that it's North Sweden, but actually it is not North Sweden exactly. It is the indigenous Sami territories. So the northern part of Europe, in Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Russia, is host of the only recognized indigenous people in Europe. And actually, there is a strong correlation that actually most mining, most industrial development over the last, especially 150 years, has been happening in the north, in the Sami territories, and mostly without free, prior, and informed consent, so to say. And this continues today. And actually now staying with the green transition, beyond this battery factory, there's a bunch of mining projects, many, most fiercely opposed by especially by the indigenous Sami. Cannot speak in their name, but however, they are progressive forces from all across Sweden, Norway, and Finland are also standing in solidarity with them, and I am as well. So there is a huge expansion of mining, especially in this part of Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And just to give another sense of scale, the current developments in North Sweden for the green transition. So this battery factory, 2 hydrogen factories, mining and so forth, would double the energy use, total energy use of the country by 2030. And this should all sort of come from green sources, which means that in a way it has to be delivered by wind power, wind factories, not farms, as they say, it's wind factories. So there's an enormous push to wind, and to consider that in the Sami territories, as part of culture and economy, there is reindeer herding, and this is considered a national interest. So the mining is considered a national interest, and very often, of course, these two clash. or in these natural resource projects. However, the state has been pushing forward an agenda of, well, if it can't be sorted because, like actually reindeer have specific patterns of movement and, you need to build infrastructure for mines, so forth, so it's inevitably they're going to impact. Well, reindeer herders are going to coexist with mines, and there's this idea of coexistence. However, there's a mounting evidence that this is obviously not really happening, and they're being cut short. And this is on top of many other projects, because of course, like I think also it's crucial to understand that in this type of periphery of the EU, or semi-peripheries, it's also mines, now battery factories, it has been historically hydropower, it's roads, actually even railway has been imposed. So all these developments are intersecting together and putting enormous pressures on these territories that are also, by the way, exposed, heating well above the world average. The situation in the Arctic is absolutely dramatic in terms of heat and the melting ice and so forth. So they're actually extremely exposed to the effects of global heating and climate and ecological breakdown. So this is the kind of contradiction that in the region, I'll finish there. In the regions where actually there is extreme effects of climate change now, today, not tomorrow, there is also the biggest industrial developments. And also, just bring another example on the Norwegian side of Sápmi, in the Sami territories as well. There's a copper mine being developed, or that has gotten licenses but has been stopped by occupation, a good coalition of young nature protectors and the Sami. And the Sami, there it's a net zero copper mine, so it would be like carbon neutral. And copper, of course, it's sold as a key for green transition and so forth. However, this mine, like the best possible in history ever made by a Norwegian company in Norway, would actually, it hasn't been to proper consultation. There's been environmental issues in the permitting, and now it's been brought to the court as well. However, would also rely on dumping mining waste into fjord, into sea. So it would dump several tens of millions of tons of mining waste into the sea, which is also, by the way, a national salmon fjord, national fishing fjord. And it is iconic to say that actually in Norway, since a few years, there is more electric cars being sold than diesel, the petrol ones. However, Norway is, sorry to know the Norwegian friends, but it is the kind of really the perfect example, has something called Statoil, now it's Equinor, has the biggest oil company and gas company in Europe, is continuing oil and gas production, and with that money is buying electric cars, just kind of in a nutshell. So this, I think, is really showing how this is kind of panning out at the moment in the EU. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mirko. So you had like one electronic Zoom coming up, no? So with Mirko. So anyways, you all see now how lithium capital is being, developed in different countries, from Serbia to Chile, Portugal, Latin America, Germany, and Sweden, and basically causing havoc everywhere it fucking gets. I wanted now to look at the political side of all of this, and it was very interesting when we talked. So, okay, one also interesting fact: we made a podcast about specifically Portugal and Chile and Serbia in CK13. It will be out on Monday, so you can also see this for more information after this panel. But I really want you guys to share one thing, and that is like the connection between lithium and fascism. So in Chile, you had Pinochet's nephew, so between fascism and extractivism. But in Chile, you had Pinochet's nephew running a company called, please correct me if I mispronounce, so Sociedad Química y Minera, and it's causing havoc basically everywhere. So I wanted to ask you, Ramón, to elaborate on that. And Cheila, so in Portugal you have Salazar, and also there's some heritage from Salazar in lithium mining, and I want you to comment to this polity, okay, because you also have more minerals now, like as a state project, basically. That's like a bit specific in comparison to the rest, but tell me about this political side, so. Maybe from left to right.
Okay, so actually, something that maybe it hasn't been said is that 26% of the world's lithium today comes from only one salt flat in Chile, which is Atacama salt flat. So that's like huge, of course. It's today it's actually 100,000 tons, and of course it's expected actually that the demand will rise so much that we will need much more. There are many other projects, new projects coming in the country. There is a short report that we published recently about Canadian investment in lithium mining in Chile that shows a little bit the situation and how several projects are spread all over the salt flat region. But there is also a lot of speculation, and it has to do actually with the companies that are controlling the lithium market today in the world. And the main exporter today is Australia and then Chile. So the two companies that are in Chile are also like the two main controllers in a global scale. Is SQM, la Sociedad Química Chilena, Sociedad Química y Minera de Chile, and Albemarle from the US. This SQM is probably the one that it's been like in the conflict more because of the size of the project, but also because of this relation with the dictatorship. Maybe you've heard about it. So yeah, it's the former son-in-law of the dictator who actually got this company for very cheap. It was a state-owned company, and yeah, it was privatized illegally, of course, and it's been like involved in several cases of corruption and also like illegal financial funding of political campaigns, even of like for socialist politicians like Michelle Bachelet, like the socialist start in Chile. She's also a very corrupted politician. She was, I don't know if you saw, but she's been like in the Council of Human Rights in the UN. But yeah, so that's the problem with extractivism in countries like ours that depends a lot economically, at least, on these kind of activities, is that the countries are co-opted. All the institutions and all the levels are co-opted. So this is the part of the heritage of the dictatorship, as well as the constitution that we are changing now. But unfortunately, it's very hard actually to put these people in jail. Actually, the controller, this person is Julio Ponce, his name. He's now the third richest person of the country, just as Elon Musk is also like one of the richest persons in the world today, thanks to all this, to green extractivism, green capitalism. So yeah, there is a lot of corruption, injustice, all this environmental damage, all these violations of human indigenous rights. But the problem is that it seems like nobody cares outside, you know? Like German agencies like GIZ or institutions that are created by the extractivist corporations like IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. They don't give a shit about all this. They will never care about it. They just want like new standards. They will speak of sustainable mining, green mining, or like the World Bank, for example, is promoting the climate smart mining. It's exactly what Mirko just described about these copper mines. So they are greenwashing like an industry that is already made for the greenwashing of capitalism itself. You know, it's like a second level greenwashing. And that's very complicated and serious also to fight, because you not only actually face all the political context that allows extractivism at this actually level to happen, but also what comes with green capitalism and green extractivism itself, and when you have to explain other movements, even the climate movement, especially in the global north, to understand that electric cars are not a solution, and that these impacts are worth like seeing, you know, being seen. And on the other hand, it's also like you want to change like an economic model of a country. You know, like a lot of people will tell you like, okay, so what we're gonna live, out from now. You know, we need extractivism because we need mining, because we need the copper to be exported and so on. So that's why also like rich and powerful countries especially are always putting like pressure to like kind of like keep the regulation very weak in countries like ours. For example, now the European Union is like renegotiating a free trade agreement with Chile, and it's especially Germany, the country that is pushing actually to get like some articles inside that kind of like facilitate the access to green minerals or transition minerals, and that also limits, for example, any project of industrialization of the minerals in the country. Because of course we export raw minerals. Actually that's essential part of the concept of extractivism is that also. Like we are sources of raw materials. Like these countries will never buy batteries or components for batteries from countries like ours. They just want the raw materials for extremely cheap, because all the value will be added like during the industrial process in China, for example, mostly. Otherwise, in the countries themselves, like Germany in this case, with big cases like Volkswagen, Daimler, for example, that are also like now creating all these new networks through these agencies that I just described, to kind of like also like greenwash extractivism locally. And this is maybe just to finish, something that is also very important to take into account, especially when Mirko mentioned like the lack of consultation and consent. Well, the consent is also manufactured. So it's not like the end of the battle when you see the resistance. Of course, we support resistance, but we will see also the movements also like breaking and communities being divided. And that's like the second stage of the struggle. Because sometimes at the beginning, it's not easy, of course, but maybe the reaction in the territory, in the community, is the first part, you're right? Like, no, of course, we're not going to allow these companies to take our water, our territories. But then the companies will apply what Alexander Dulab calls the social engineering, and they will come with experts, with anthropologists, sociologists, geographers, and all kinds of professionals and scientists, and they will understand the territory, they will see the cultural origins and values of people, their needs, and they will come with these agencies and cooperate with the government. GIZ is everywhere, like literally. They are everywhere, and they are directly financed by the EV industry. And they will come and they will co-opt leadership, they will co-opt NGOs, or they will bring their own NGOs. Also, we have the problem of all the, these institutions that are very famous and that speak on behalf of movements and communities and kind of like say what is acceptable or not, like big NGOs, the green ones, the big greens actually are called, but these are financed also by the industries. So that's another problem. And I think maybe it's not something that you are seeing now here, but maybe you will, and it's good to take this or to have this into consideration because it's what we are living now. Actually, we've been seeing like people that used to were the first actually to oppose to the lithium expansion, and now they are working for NGOs that are financed by the lithium mines, because a lot of people say like, okay, if we cannot kick them out, we have to deal with them, That's or sometimes in the communities they say, okay, we're not consulted, there's nothing we can do, it's our right actually to get some part of the income. Actually, we tend to also like speak a lot about the consultation and ILO 169, the 169 from the World Trade Work Organization that establishes the conditions for indigenous consultation, which is good, of course. But what this actually agreement says, and this agreement that has been signed by Chile, of course, says that the communities have the right to actually to perceive or to receive part of the income from activities that occur in their territories. So it's a totally neoliberal perspective of the rights and the popular participation. It has nothing to do with autonomy or with a change in the economic model, So it's also important, I think, to see all these nuances and all these like small differences that when it comes to the material reality actually make a big change.
So regarding extractivism and fascism in Portugal, so in the early stages of what we call Estado Novo, which was the Salazar dictatorship that ended in 1974, not that long ago. So the early stages, this was before the Second World War. There was this great will of this fascist government to understand, to know what we had on the soil, and this was done, as always is, in the spirit of the scientific knowledge. But there is no such thing as an innocent prospection, in my opinion, and history has proven, in this case, me right. So basically, at these first stages, Portugal finds, for example, wolfram. Portugal is going to then explore wolfram and sell during the Second World War, for example, at the same time to the Allies and to the Nazis. So there you go, a very, you can imagine what kind of government this was. It's true. And then after this, in the 60s, this endeavor continues, and this fascist government keeps on sending geologists to these very rural areas that still had communal living, and they still have baldios, which are lands that are communally managed. And of course, they were very isolated, and populations that have had a lot of autonomy, and of course, this could pass through a fascist government. And so because of that, they start all these big operations, not only like on mineral extractivism, but also dam construction, every project that could cause these communities to fall apart, basically, because they were very resistant also against the fascist regime, and they didn't need the government. They were completely almost autonomous. They had their own assemblyary processes. They are still trying to survive in Portugal. But basically, so during the 60s, these geologists keeps coming to these territories, and actually we learned very recently that these studies from the 60s, from the time of the fascism, are the ones that are the base for these mining companies to work, are the base for them to know about wolfram or lithium or whatever mineral in case, and to come. So it actually fascism did the dirty work for the mining companies early and many years before the companies would actually come. And so, for example, in this area that I'm most connected to, which is Covas do Barroso and Mina do Barroso, they say they want to make the biggest lithium mine in Europe, even though Rio Tinto tells you the same. So you see that actually this is speculative operations on both of our countries happening at this time. So basically, when they come first to this territory, they come in 2006, and they start investing in the place, like Lola said, without any permit whatsoever. So they have already investments in the soil in this area, and they are working in the shadows since 2006 till 2018. And they said to the local population, "Oh, we're just seeing what is on the floor. No, it's all good. We're just seeing if there's water and what's the water like, and we're doing some drilling spots to see if the water." They actually lied to these populations. And only when the state issues this plan of looking again at our soil and putting it in the market again, and this was in 2018, only then the populations really understood what was happening and started the fight. So this is just for us to understand that, once again, there is no innocent perspection. When I was doing the Giro por la Vida with the Zapatistas companions in Barroso, in this area, last year, there was this man, great man, Eliezer, from the National Congress, Indigenous Congress of Mexico. He told me something that really got into my heart, which was, think about this, Cheila. They know about this for 60 years now. Once they know what is in the soil, capitalism will come. Maybe with another name, the company can change the name. Maybe it is a state operation, maybe it is a private operation, but they will come. So don't be innocent that you are going to win this in a year or two. We have to prepare. This is the fight of our lives. We have to prepare for the next 20, 30, 40 years, because we have to be so alert, because they will come. I don't know if I answered your question, yes? But yeah, this is the connection of extractivism and fascism. There will always be this connection. There is none without the other. And we also know that once capitalism is in crisis, the fascists come. They come to do the work that the liberals can't. So let's, and that's why we're here also today. So let's be alert.
I just want to thank you very much for this point. This is like, bullseye, because here we had the elections, and then this idea that kind of okay, whatever. So just let me pick this up for you. Okay. Anyways, so we are very polite here. Yes, and then we fight. After the elections, people kind of yes, we won, cool. Yeah, I mean, no quick victory in terms of lithium. And also, what you said about these historical connections with fascism, and I mean, this goes back in Serbia up until Milosevic in 1997. So, I mean, I think all of these countries have something in common. So, Bojana, if you want to add something on this, and also, since Vučić kind of I asked about the dictatorship and, this relation, so maybe this, common background is something that also kind of connects Serbia, Portugal, and Chile.
I'm not going to talk about the president because I just find it really disturbing and boring. I'm going to talk about facts and people's roles in stuff. But I didn't like your question at first, but now I love it. Because I think it was one of your essays that I read about economy of fascism. And then a further conversation with you about the announcement that we made just before the election. Thinking we thought Serbia was going to just run onto the streets again because we made this announcement. We had these recordings from someone from the member at the University of Bor faculty, and also an employee at Thyssen, basically confirming that Rio Tinto was bringing machinery into Serbia on a cancelled project, on a project that was cancelled because the government realised that if they didn't cancel it, they would lose this election. Because people were coming out onto the streets, and they weren't coming out because of Rio Tinto. They were coming out because of the expropriation law. I think, I was so thrilled by how intelligent the level of protest was, and the reason for people coming out. And that expropriation law would have basically made legal what this government does anyway. But it would have made any legal recourse for us completely impossible. And I think people realised, and and I think we really strategized. A lot of groups strategized. We all decided to get along for a week, and we all talked about sort of really addressing this, not even as an attack on the country, but that we need to win the country back. It is gone if this law goes through. And by the way, this law will come back on the table. It hasn't been taken off the table. He just didn't put it into power. So stay aware, we'll stay aware, and we will tell you when it comes back on the table, because it will. But after we made that announcement about the relationship between Rio Tinto and Thyssen and DMT, so Thyssen is an Austrian-German company and DMT is a German company, you told me that Thyssen was funded by Thyssen funded Nazis.
Yeah, they funded Nazis, one of the main funders of the Nazis.
And it just sort of opened up. I always knew this, but sometimes when you get caught up in one specific case or one specific thing, you're looking at, okay, who's this shareholder that I could contact, or who's the bank that funds this element of the project, or why did Rio Tinto? You just get so caught in the minutiae. It made me realise that so much of what we're dealing with just today is a byproduct of what happened because of fascism. We don't live outside of history. And this period, at some point, will just be looked at as part of the last 100 years. It's not going to be looked at this specific day or this specific one battle. And I think this, today we're looking, at the war in Russia, and we're looking at all these sanctions. And it's why wasn't Thyssen sanctioned after the Second World War? Or during? Why didn't the Allies sanction all these companies, and why are they all billionaires now? And I'm not even going to answer the question. I think it's just a really good question to meditate on and think about, because we are living with companies that are a direct byproduct of fascism. And should they be allowed to, people are sanctioning Dostoevsky and Tchaikovsky, and Thyssen is a $1 billion company. So that's where we're at. There's hope. You have to ask us for hope at the end, because we can't end with all this
I
doom.
planned at the end. So
So same question.
Yeah, basically yes. I think since.
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't have enough like historical background to completely answer this question, but what I can say is like that Germany is massively misusing its power, like on different levels. Like with the extraction of resources in Europe, for example, it's like using this for its image. So we can say like, okay, we're not using the resources from like Global South, we are using them from Europe, but still the ones profiting from it is not the countries where the resources are, but like Germany. So I think that's one part of where it's misusing its power. Also like that it's just possible to declare gas and nuclear energy as green energy, and now it is. So I think there's a lot of things where we have such economic power that we are misusing, or like that Germany is misusing. And also like one thing that Angela Merkel apparently said is like if to the lithium in Serbia, if Europe is interested, so are we. And I think this is pretty much showing how this capitalist system is working. Like it's based on profit and on competition, and we are completely like reproducing like this neo-colonial system. Also with like countries of the global south, as they are, a lot of countries are like kept in like a debt trap. So they have a lot of perpetual debt that they have to repay, but the interest rates are really high. So they have no chance of repaying this debt. So they are kept in this debt, and for this they are like forced, like institutions that are important are like the IMF, so the International Money Fund, and the World Bank, and they are like putting restrictions onto those countries, saying like, okay, you have to cut budgets on healthcare or on education, and also like forcing countries to extract fossil fuels and also resources to repay their debts. And so, as Germany is it's actually the fourth biggest shareholder of these institutions, it has a lot of power, and like the people who are in power are the finance minister of Germany. So it's actually like a political debate, and like the politics can pretty much demand how the system is working, how this financial system is working. And through that, I think they have a lot of power that they are misusing completely. Which is also just reproducing the neo-colonial and racist system over and over again.
Thank you for mentioning the IMF and the World Bank, because I want to add this. In the 60s and 70s, Yugoslavia owed a lot of debt, and a recession hit, like it was 60 to 70 somewhere in there, and a recession hit the West, and particularly the US, and they stopped our exports, and it made our debts. It made it impossible to pay off debts. You might know more about this. And instead of just figuring out a plan to pay these debts back, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund created a plan that was also about social restructuring. So it wasn't just ucijenili su nas. It's such a better word in Serbian. My mum's kind of gasping at this because it's new information for her, and I can like just hear, she's over there, but I can also hear her in my head going, don't say that because you don't know, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm reading about it right now, and I can give you all the resources and the sources, so I'll give them to you, don't worry about it. But there was a whole bunch of sort of rules there around privatization, around taking money out of the public sector, or like social services, all this stuff, and it was, and I find, I just learned all this stuff, so maybe you might know about this a bit more, but you know, it's again that idea of the continuity, you know, like the Second World War, Yugoslavia, and then all this debt, and then all in come the neoliberals telling us how, oh, now this can't be a socialist country, it needs to go neoliberal because that's like really the best thing ever, and that means that like all these beautiful natural resources are going to be, you know, extracted, and that's really good for us because it's you know, radna snaga and, you know, money for the state, and it's the same perpetual narrative, it's just different materials. That's what the green transition is, and that's what greenwashing is.
Who was it? Mirko?
Oh,
Sorry,
Hello,
we forgot.
I hope you're good.
You want to say something, Mirko?
There's no fascism.
You
when
go first. It's fine.
Okay.
You go first.
No fascism in Sweden, you say. Okay.
Okay.
On the same question. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. With fascism?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just like a small comment about fascism in Chile now, in the discussion and all the struggles since the social outbreak actually, all the movements and people who are kind of like putting these subjects into the public discussion have been persecuted and attacked like by extreme right groups, especially in the south of Chile, especially Mapuche territory. So I think that it's something that the menace is always there, as you say, like since some faces are more visible or some demands are more visible, you will have these groups. And actually in Chile, we were about to have like a, it's not an exaggeration, it's a fascist president. He's the grandson, the great grandson, how to say, the son of a Nazi German, like Jose Antonio Cast. He was like a candidate, and he actually had the first majority in the first round in Chile. So fascism is just there, and the dictatorship in Chile ended in '89. So, well, we have Bolsonaro, we have so many others. So now we're kind of like recovering Latin America, but the menace is just always there. And about what Lola has shared about the energy, I say that it's also super important that we missed it here, is that for some reason, lithium has been sold like as like an energy alternative. You know, but lithium, it doesn't produce any energy. Lithium is just for the storage. So that's like so you see how they manipulate actually the information to make people believe things that are not even like physically possible. And again, the discussion about science, capitalism is not about science. That's another lie. To make us think that capitalism is rational and everything against capitalism is emotional. It's not true, because capitalism is greed, and greed is an emotion. A very shitty one, of course, but it's an emotion. It's not scientific. So this energy transition is not scientific at all. Like, this is not science. They cannot claim they are speaking out of science. You know? So what we do is more science. We have a method. We have like a dialogue. We produce information out of empirical research. This is more scientific than capitalism or the energy transition. Tesla, you know, like Elon Musk, he's a person that he's ill. Like, he's like spending time and energy to go to space, and he's speaking about colonizing Mars. So can you like see like what is science really? You know. So the energy thing is that there's no energy in lithium. Well, again, with fascism and war, lithium was declared like a national interest mineral in Chile during Cold War and during the dictatorship because of the nuclear potential of lithium. So it wasn't for electric cars in the future, as if Pinochet had like a magic ball. No. He was just thinking about producing like nuclear power for weapons for the Cold War. So that also made easier actually the exploitation by private hands. Even though by law, even today with the current legal framework, it's a state-owned mineral, it's exploited by private corporations. But again, to the energy, I knew about the Serbian rivers because I'm also part of the free-flowing rivers network in Chile, and about the opposition to the mega dams, and how the last pristine rivers were in Eastern Europe and being menaced by these projects. So with the electric car revolution, as they called it, we will have another problem. We will have the problem of energy, actually. So this is, when I say like this is a stage, okay, it's true, it's one of the first stages, but there is like a whole, actually, like bunch of conflicts related to the transition. the mining is one, then the production of energy, because hydropower is considered as renewable. So then you will have all the justifications for mega dams. You will have more justifications for bringing like these wind factories, for these solar power panels that need more minerals. Actually, there are some articles super interesting of some critical academics that have been writing about how, for example, the demand for the building of the windmills is actually exhausting the forest in Ecuador, you know, because they need this special kind of wood. So it's the whole stuff, and you will have more power and different kind of like power projects that are also a menace for the territories, and you will have like green hydrogen, because as you say, like the green gas, they call it, like, they add the green on everything. It's like as they will, like literally. So now they have the green hydrogen revolution, as they call it again. And Chile is one of the main targets again. Like, please, like, leave us alone. Like, because of the sun exposure in the Atacama desert. But for that you need water, because you have to separate the particles of water and hydrogen and oxygen from water. So green means that you use like renewable energies for that process. Otherwise it's like gray hydrogen. For that you use gas or coal. You know, so it's so fucked up that then all these cars, all these new factories, all these new activities will need much more energy as well. So it's not going to be only about minerals, but also about electric energy indeed. So yeah, I think that maybe not something that we can analyze in depth here, but just to see that this is just part of a much larger problem, right? And these problems are also in Portugal because there is a lot of sunlight, because it's the south, you know, right? You know, so, and yeah. And the last thing about, and just to finish, all this, as you say, like all this critique will be also like kind of like stolen and processed and like taken or transformed into more like capitalist-friendly alternative or solutions for things. So it's super important to keep like the eyes super open, be super critical, be super connected, these networks, and occupy the institutions, occupy the academy, occupy the territories, occupy the streets, everything, because as you said also yesterday, like all like this struggle has to be everywhere and with everyone.
All hands on deck.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm also kind of like when you mentioned the green revolution, I was also thinking, like, and we also had this revolution, and there's like revolution is the word is being put everywhere, and I was like, leave the revolution or else you might actually get it. So that would be like also a good point. Mirko, back to Sweden. 10 points for Sweden. You have something to say on fascism in Sweden.
Yeah. Oh, so many points. I mean, really. Just wanted to emphasize, I think it's really, to look at what everyone essentially said, but to really look at the continuities between the fossil capital, the fossil infrastructure, and these so-called green projects and green infrastructure, and the green capital. And the people doing this is really key, I think. And I just want to say that actually I think it's been really great that we it's clear now that, under capital, in here in this, Agora, it's clear that under capitals it's impossible to address the climate and ecological breakdown and social injustices. However, I think I just wanted to bring in another aspect from the European context that, with kind of absolute acknowledgement of extremes such as Portugal, Chile, and the actual existing fascisms that there. I think also the other side of the coin is that actually fascism is only an extreme or a total form of capitalism, and the fact to actually understand, and I think it's crucial to see that nation state, any nation state, but especially, European nation state, because it's made in Europe product and project, is a potentially a fascist state. Because, in great part, because it is also an extractivist state. And I'll just give a few things there just to add. You all said it, but I just want to kind of bring this to say it loud once again, that actually each nation state relies you know, on ownership of citizens and bodies, and you know, all nation states that I know of in Europe, at least, you know, have these mineral laws that, of course, say, you know, that well, you know, you might own a patch of land, but actually underneath your feet, yeah, you know, if there is something, you know, it's going to be states or capitals, whatever, who comes first, and this implies that each state, nation state, relies on specific forms of exclusion of, you know, minorities in the country, and often, especially from the European perspective, in the rest of the world. So a community or a person needs to be made cheap, less worthy to be able to extract labor or, you know, metals, but also the whole of nature, of course, is cheaper. So, and of course, each nation state in Europe has very close connection to, you know, militarism, and metals are part of that. And we need to really look all the time. You know, there are countless examples, you know, across Europe, but also in our region, also how metals have been and are part of the conflicts, in various conflicts, especially in the 1900s. That's a long story, but you know, metals are involved all the time, also fossil fuels. But also, I think the core is what Ramón said, to go back to the kind of special manifestation of green extractivism, the current fascistization, I would say, of nation states. I'm speaking about Europe because that's where I'm more known, and here I include also the Southeast Europe, that include like post-Yugoslavian region, Serbia as well. So not only you know, the fascistization that we see in order to facilitate the green transition actually reveals something else that Ramón, I want to repeat it because it's happening in Europe as well, is that states are like fascist in the sense that they have the total monopoly of violence. They have always had, but specifically nation states have. And extraction relies on this social engineering and monopolizing violence on and on. And on all the levels, on the big level, but also molecular, on this splitting and destroying effectively social ties and communities. So I think this is really key for us. I finished there. That actually, I think that there is like also, yeah, we have to look at this. That there is what is the actual distinction. I think it's just the level of degree between state and private enterprise, capital, because often, of course, especially on the left, we see the the corporations, so forth, and as the big problem, and the bad guys, and they are, but also, of course, like there is like very little evidence that especially when you speak about metals and stuff, that actually state-owned enterprises will do better. They actually mostly don't, and so forth. So I think that to look at seriously into the kind of fossil fascism actually existing today, especially across Europe, and how it's tied to climate denialism, and how it facilitates continuation of coal, nuclear, and so forth by the right and right-wing parties, but also the more emergent forms of green fascism and eco-fascism, or even on the community and resistance level. And that's a whole big discussion we should keep having. But how the far right actually is also essentially opposing sometimes the same things as we are, but for all the wrong reasons. The far right is against wind power. The far right is often against the lithium as well. And this is like a really serious problem, actually. Because, I think that's a big thing. But it's all across Europe. It's happening. And we really need to kind of sharpen our tools, because actually I think that, essentially only anti-extractivism is possible only if it is anti-fascism. Otherwise, it is just another form of violence that kind of becomes something else.
Yeah, that's also thanks. I mean, in case people didn't hear him, Mirko said basically that the only way to be anti-extractivist is to be anti-fascist. So yes. I mean, completely, this is a very good point as well. And I wanted to shed also my personal I just 2 minutes basically before I pose more questions, and then we give the floor to the audience. Bojana was mentioning this Yugoslavian debts and stuff like that, and it was I'm gonna do a huge leap of arguments, but it will be short. Anyways, these expropriation laws, which tried to pass this year. I mean, when this happened, I was constantly reminded of Weimar Germany and of this idea that the state is kind of passing up laws and ruling more by decree. And the idea we're fed with this fucking liberal ideology. You should expect the rule of law, the state to behave as this good gentleman. All of you are equal. No, you are fucking not. So we're not fucking equal. We come from different families, from different backgrounds, different social income. We're fucking not equal. And this is the idea that the state is making us more unequal. And not only that, it's also making nature more unequal by doing extractivisms, by doing expropriations of lands, which are actually, okay, thanks,
So, which are actually, how do you say, it's not the legal state of liberalism is this idea, you know, like that this, yeah, you have a parliament and the parliament says, okay, this is my opinion, then you say, okay, this is my opinion, and then, okay, yeah, and then that never fucking, you know, like that's not the reality, it never was, you know, and the idea that this is the normal is it's the reverse, you know, the fascist stuff and the capitalist stuff, and you know, complete conflicts and like complete destruction of environments have been like the mainstay of capitalism. Only that we had this small 30-year, how to say, pause between 45 and 89, you know, essentially when we had socialism kind of like acting as a bulwark against all of this. And then, my God, like after 89, you suddenly 10 years pass and, you know, 20 years pass and there's one global crisis, another global crisis, and a global pandemic. I mean, come on. So, I mean, there are some things about black and white in life. So, and you know, this idea that capitalism can just run, it cannot run, you know. So, as you said, there's no exponential growth. And I wanted to connect also this, like some magical thinking, you know, with what Bojana said about this, because once you go back to 45, what the fuck happens? You know, you have a fucking huge war industry, and now there's no more war. Profits fall, hello, so profitability falls, and then you have the outsourcing of production also to Eastern Europe, and you know, once that kind of like, how you say, reaches its a little bit of its limits, then you have inflation, and then you have what you mentioned, the Nixon shock in the US, and then you have suddenly Tito's debts just like skyrocketing, and we've been actually fed, you know, 20 years of ideology that Tito was this evil person who was like indebting us and killing Serbians and whatnot. I'm not a Tito lover, but anyways, this is also an ideology. And then, you know, the idea that you are somehow an indebted country and you want, you need to catch up with Germany. We will never catch up with Germany, and then Germany itself will kind of like, you know, like not break down, but you know, like if you look at what's happening now with Europe and this thing, and the idea in all of this chaos that lithium would save us and the green energy transition, just like, I mean, I consciously like, you know, how to say, gave you a lot of information so that you can see how fucking unviable this is. That's not going to be any green transition that's going to save us. And what I wanted to add upon this, and this actually has a point, and the point is a question to Lula. So, alternatives. This is in this chaos that we're happening, you know, this like that we're living through. This is a question to all of you, basically, what alternatives are we pushing forward, you know? And this is actually the end of the debate I wanted to do before, I mean panel, yeah, so, sorry, excuse me, don't kill me. So, you know, before we go to the audience, so, Lula, your movement, Conserving Getriebe, you're doing stuff basically that's actually addressing this very issue of debt and climate. So, and you know, you're pushing forward this because it's not that known in Serbia. This idea that, you know, German banks and like other banks are like using this, you know, poor status of some countries which are indebted, you know, for historical reasons in the sense that they have been made indebted, you know, by imperialism. So, like, what are you exactly doing, and like, what alternatives are you pushing forward? I'm sorry, this is a huge question.
No, I'm pointing at my mum because you're proving my point.
Okay.
Okay. So I hope I can answer this question like in the way it was supposed to be. So yeah, there's different options, and I think what you were like kind of referring to is that there's a campaign going on that's called Debt for Climate, and if you haven't looked into it, it's definitely worth it. And so this is like one possible way of starting to change the system, because the idea is to turn the debt into climate action, because like the global north has a lot of climate debt that if you like calculate it in financial matters, it is like massively high, even only for Germany. But still, as I said, like these countries of the global north are keeping like countries in the global south in this debt trap, forcing them to extract fossil fuels and other resources. And the idea is that the global north cancels all the debt of the global south, and for that making it possible to keep on the one side keep the fossil fuels in the ground, so we don't have any more emissions, and also making it possible for those countries to start like a just transition in their own countries. So that's the demand of this campaign, and I think that is one possible way of starting to transition this, or start to think like differently and start to transition the system and the this whole financial system that has such massive power, and start thinking in new ways and making it possible to other countries in the global south to start developing like on their own and not being held under control by countries of the global north. So I think that is a very powerful way. And then I think it's also really important not only focusing on one topic, but there are a lot of different movements that are all demanding different things, focusing on different things. And I think it's really important that we have this diversity of tactics, many movements that are going onto the streets and standing in for their demands. Because if we only like rely on the government, there's nothing going to happen. So we need every person to like be empowered and to realize that we are actually all political, even though we may not think we are. But if we realize that everything that we do is also like a political action, then I think to get empowered and to go onto the streets or do whatever you feel is the best political action that you can take, and start changing the system like from the bottom and not waiting for the government to act.
So the question's interesting because I think there's a very neoliberal kind of side to that question, which is like, well, if we can't do lithium, what can we do? And okay, actually there are answers to that question. So there are nitrate-ion batteries, right? And it is true that they are less combustible, far better, like much cheaper, better for the environment, and that's great. Because then we can just keep going down this road until we reach a limit of that resource, and then we're fucked again. So that is the answer that I give to people who don't want an answer about degrowth. This is my personal opinion. It's not Marš za Drine. Marš za Drine doesn't really talk about who we talk about who we vote for, but we don't vote for the same people. We don't have the same idea about like a global solution or a community solution. You know, our aim is very, very, very specific, and that's how we bond, and that's how we bond with all the groups we work with. But my personal opinion about this stuff is definitely degrowth, and that includes stopping the production of plastic completely. We have enough of it. Plastic is actually like, I think even the word means reuse or something, like it's just supposed to be used again and again and again and again and again. And like, let's not even go into the chemical it leaches, but it's the petrol industry, like it is the petroleum industry. So stopping the use of single-use plastics. Okay, so now there's going to be a neoliberal argument about money and like how, you know, all these workers that are going to be like, okay, fine, then a universal basic income, or increase subsidies to agriculture, or like let's just all go to the cellar and live there for a while the transition between like plastic and no plastic takes place. I mean, literally in Serbia right now, our food and water resources are in danger, and they are going to be the most valuable resources of the future. Right now, everyone in Serbia can go to their cell or their village, and you can literally stay there with your grandparents or your parents and grow crops and eat and be self-sustaining. Done, right? Sorry, you know, if something bad happens, you can't have your yacht, you can't have your third electric car or whatever it was that you said, but we can survive. And this is like, I'm talking very extremely here, but I'm just saying the essence of it, like we have those resources to completely survive. Not just that, we have the resources to build our economy locally, completely. Like our agriculture like is dozens of times larger than Holland's, but Holland makes something like $80 billion of income on agriculture, you know, and we make like 5 or 6. So those kind of things I believe in decentralization. My mother believes in a global solution. So, and I get that concept because I feel like if you're going to create a global problem, if you're going to be a global polluter, then, okay, you fucked this up on a global level. Where's the global solution? Like, what's your plan globally? I believe decentralization is the way to go. I mean, it's literally how the Marš Drine campaign, along with so many other little campaigns, works. You know, every group, it's how we function. It's what, I mean, you said it too. I really think it's about sovereignty from everything from a village to a community to a state to a country to, you know, to a nation if you want to, you know, if you want to be a big nation. But I believe, and I also think that a huge thing that we never talk about is the military-industrial complex and what a polluter that is. And not just aviation, but also navy and ships and production. And, you know, like there's this whole thing about copper, you know, and copper has to be used. And it does, you know, for electricity, blah, 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 blah. But copper has 100% performance when it's recycled. So we can all, like, share copper pots. I bought some at a market the other day. Awesome, love them, you know, secondhand. But the idea of, like, bullets, you know, being used, like the idea of, you know, Butte, Montana, there's a little town, and, you know, they can't use a whole part of it now because that town mined copper for bullets in the Second World War. And our military-industrial complexes on a global level are spending more and more and more and more money. And, like, where are the electric tanks and the electric trucks and the electric this and the electric... They don't exist. Like, and even then, the resources and the minerals and the metals, and I'm so, like, I find it incredibly interesting personally that, like, no one discusses that. You know, it's like it's too big a problem, and it is huge. It's not even a discussion, let alone something that's been put into practice. Like, the military is never something that receives budget cuts. In the US, here, like, it just doesn't, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you know a country that cuts its military budget. And I think one of the big things that we don't really talk about is not just anti-fascism, but, like, what are the social principles that actually are something constructive that aren't fascism? And people, okay, so feminism is a really bad word in Serbia because feminism has kind of been branded as, like, this neo-lib feminism of, like, these women, you know, making it women against men and blah, blah, blah. But feminism, you know, social feminism and black-led feminism, in terms of a movement that is anti-dominant, in terms of a movement that is about abolishing a structure of dominance and a structure that's based on financial dominance or physical dominance or racial dominance, at its core is something that, don't call it feminism, but I think we should be discussing it. So, like, in every conversation about fascism, it's also about, okay, well, what's the not anti, what's, like, the constructive thing here? And, you know, we talk about that with Marš Drine. We're like, okay, well, when Rio Tinto packs the bags and goes, and they will, like, we've won that battle. It's just going to take 10 years for them to realise that, but it's fine. When they leave, you know, what kind of agricultural subsidies can we ask for? Or even in the meantime, like, what kind of things can we, you know, do in our communities to increase the income of agriculturalists, farmers, things like that? And I really believe in that. Like, and do more therapy, because it's zero, it's still a capitalistic, you know, exchange, but zero carbon emissions.
Spend money on therapy, not clothes.
Lovely. So in my case, solutions, it's not easy since we are facing, well, the most crucial time for humanity and for the planet, but let's try. So degrowth is absolutely central in my opinion. So besides that I already mentioned, I would say, for example, regenerative cultures. If we understand that we have no other option, we have to readapt not only the economy, the architecture, the education. It has to be completely transversal. This change. And as you said before, Bojana, many times when we talk about emissions, for example, we are mainly centered on the car-related emissions, but when we think that, for example, fashion has more emissions than the aviation industry, or the cruise line tourism business has more emissions than aviation together with the car. So when we look at this, the change has to be so profound and so deep that I hope we are all with our hearts open and maybe in therapy to be able to endure the what we have in front of us. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of things that don't involve carbon, like emissions.
Exactly. No, but it has to be.
Therapy.
Because this is not going to happen without at this time, we are in the crisis of values also. The endemic disease of the West is depression. And they tell us that we have everything that we want. They even want to sell us more. But actually, we're empty on the inside. So I truly believe in community. I truly believe in radical care. Because I truly believe that when we care about each other, capitalism falls. It falls because there is no emissions, there is no transaction, and for example, other things that I believe, I could talk a lot about this, but assemblary processes. There has to be assemblary processes. How are we going to trust the same people that have led us for the last 30 years in wrong decisions that have been bought by the system one time and another? How are we going to trust them with the sacrifices that we are going to have to make all together? We are the ones that are going to decide, and then we inform the governments. Yes. Not the contrary. Not the contrary. It's going to be top. It's not going to be top bottom. We don't. If we allow this to happen, capitalism is going to last. And for capitalism to last 10, 15 years more, as I said before, they are going to destroy what is the rest that is still in our world. But I want to also talk about, besides the regenerative cultures, there is something that comprises, for example, bioregionalism, which sees, for example, rivers not being the property of any country in specific, but they are managed by the whole community that depends on this resource. I don't like to call it resource, but this resource. So we have to manage the land. We have to get back to the land, to the and with the connection with community and the land. Because once again, this is a problem of values. We have this illusion that we are separate. We are not. We are interdependent, and this is also scientific. This is not like I'm a poet, but this is not poetic. This is the real. We are interdependent. So each time I want to make profit on this, someone else will have to pay this. That's why we are sacrificial areas to big countries, to the potencies. And also regarding something that Bojana said, this one thing versus the other, the local, should this be a local solution? Should this be a global solution? I truly believe that decisions have to be locally based, but that we have to be globally articulated. And that's what we're doing also here. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing when we are working with people that are facing the same problems that we are. And as the Zapatistas would say, we have to share pains, share also joys, share the struggles, share knowledge, share experience. And in this feeling of radical care, we have to base all our actions, this is my opinion, solidarity, mutual aid, radical care. These are the things that are going to allow for us to build trust on each other and to not fall into this separation, once again, narrative that we are so different. Because when in 20, 30 years, and right now things are happening, guys, right now things are happening that the scientists only scheduled for 2070. The Gulf current is changing. The Arctic is burning. We have feed loops are happening. So this is not something on the future, it's now. But we know that the crisis will go on. So how are we going to face this if we are not together in this? We have to be together in this. Just to finish, I truly believe that this global articulation has to be based on bioregionalism that I really want you guys to research a bit on, also on regenerative cultures, because we are not going to be able to answer to this crisis if we keep on having the conversation they want us to have. They want us to answer to this question. So, oil or lithium? So, gas or hydrogen? So, nuclear? We don't have to have those answers. These needs are Western needs that were created for this system. We don't have to have these energetic needs. These energetic needs are completely insane for the reality of the land which we live on. And just to finish, there are communities that are trying to have autonomous decision and living. And so I just want to bring that we are resisting. We are resisting with the Zapatista, we are resisting with the Rojava, we are resisting with the indigenous peoples, and we have to dream another dream. And it's not going to be with their narrative of climate change. We have to talk about colonialism, all of these things, and answer in our own words, not theirs.
It's about the alternatives.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to answer.
What have you been?
Yeah, I've been like, because I've been working like in this question of the alternatives, like on the ground, more like in articulation, locally, more like regionally. And yeah, I think that, I don't know, like what's called the crisis, whether it's the climate crisis or the pandemic crisis, it's part of like a bigger or deeper problem. And some call it a civilizational crisis, which it's also a crisis of understanding. So it could be called an epistemological crisis as well. And we are, I think, in the face of all these issues that we're facing today, and actually the realization that we are actually interconnected. Like it's probably a bad experience, but the pandemic has probably been like the last like global experience that kind of like taught us that we are all affected by what's going on in the world, in this planet. And I think in this sense that more than solutions, I agree with the comrades. It's more about the perspectives. So we need to change the perspectives and the way we understand reality to transform it, right? So this understanding and this comprehension and these alternatives will actually come from the territories and from in a local level necessarily. I agree with the need of like a global articulation. I think that actually my hope is in this kind of like this new internationalism that is rising now, motivated by life, by the desire and the claim of our right to live.
Yes.
Before it was like in history, it was about how to organize society and economy and production, right? Today that is part, of course, of the discussion, but today it's more about life itself. This is like a terminal crisis. It's not a hypothesis, right? It's a constatation. We are in this crisis now. So we are kind of like faced to a situation that we didn't necessarily produce. So it is unfair, maybe, and for some is more than for others. So I think that I can maybe speak about like local experiences, and it's actually something that we in Uppsala are trying to do now. Like after all these diagnosis of like the crisis about extractivism, about green colonialism, this unbearable climate coloniality, right? We say like, okay, but sometimes we're not really seeing how people organize themselves, and they have solutions. Some are pre-existent, like the pre-capitalist modes of living and relations that are still there, and some others are not necessarily pre-capitalistic, are anti-capitalistic, right? So sometimes, also about feminism, like sometimes, I don't know, like some people don't want labels or categories that come from social movements or even from the academia, but in the material field, let's say, the transformations are occurring, are there, and we have like common ground for a lot of like connections, for articulation, for this transformation. In this sense, I don't know, like I also think that it's very hard to think of the end of something, because capitalism is not like a model or a system, it's more like the modes of relations, right? So I think that this change will be progressive. It's being progressive, But sometimes I'm like hopeful, but I also want to be like have to my I don't know like to acknowledge that capitalism will transform itself according to the conditions, you know. And it's something that Rosa Luxemburg said, like capitalism needs to go always beyond and to create the conditions for dispossession for its own reproduction. And it needs to go beyond because it will exhaust the territories. It will exhaust the communities. It will exhaust the ecosystems. So they will always go beyond where it doesn't exist or where the relations are still not necessarily the ones that it dictates. In this sense, we need to always have like in mind, I think that this will be always the capitalism in all its colors and modes and with all the subjects, adjectives will be there, and we need to kind of like be capable of like creating our own modes of living. Maybe some people will still live there, maybe the machines will still be there, maybe some people will choose electric cars, okay, but what we will do, you know? So yeah, so in especially during the pandemic actually, and it's something that I'm really focusing on my activism and my research as well, is how the communities of indigenous farmers, for example, they are recovering the lands, and they are kind of like defending the right to manage the water in collectively, which is something that almost disappeared in Chile because of all the political system installed by the dictatorship. But it's interesting how sometimes the communities, for example, they were not necessarily fighting what we call capitalism, or they were not fighting neoliberalism, or they were not even fighting the laws that regulated the water. But what they did was to use the private water system to kind of like register water rights and to manage it collectively. So I think that yes, it's like these are struggles that go in parallel. One or maybe one more than two actually. One is in the ideas, the principles that we are creating now in the face of these conditions. Then how we change that, but also how we adapt in the immediate term. We need to do things right now, and maybe those the other changes will be part of the fight or the struggle that is for life, right? So it goes all together, and seeing these farmers recovering the water, recovering the seeds, for example, practicing the minga, which is the collective work, which is unpaid work, and it's community work, and seeing how they adapt actually to the present conditions, which are extremely challenging, let's say. Actually, Mirko said something that I discussed yesterday in the podcast. We also, it's not always good to romanticize too much the conditions of farmers or the indigenous communities, because they are also facing the impacts of climate change more than anyone else in the world. So they also have like this double challenge or triple challenge. It's like the vulnerability, social vulnerability and injustice, extractivism expanding and taking over the territories and the people, and then the climate crisis or the impacts or the effects of climate change, right? So I think in this sense, it's interesting, and it's our experience is how to we try to kind of like produce knowledge all together, like in this ecology of knowledges, like how Boaventura Sousa Santos calls it. It's like all knowledges are as important as the others. They are all necessary. And today, the traditional knowledge, the seeds, water management, all the communitarism practices are as important as the need to understand the impacts of the crisis and how to adapt to it. You know, so we need to, it's more than saving just the tap water when we go to the toilet. Of course, we need to do that. Of course, we need to eat locally. But at some point, we will really need to do more than that. We will need to be prepared for climate events. We will need to be prepared for droughts. We will need to be prepared for like growing our own foods, because maybe like the food chain will be broken. Maybe the rich countries will grab the food because that's what they do today. Like in Chile, it happens with the avocados and many other produce. Like sometimes we don't have it, but you go to Europe and it's in the supermarkets. So that's also going to happen, you know. So we need to build like this food sovereignty, water sovereignty, energy sovereignty. This is something, since all these issues are related to energy as well. We are trying also to focus more also in the principle of sovereignty and justice, to see also with these lenses actually the initiatives and alternatives that come from the ground. And many communities are organizing today. Communities that never, for example, had access to electricity, they are producing their own energy, you know? So that's also interesting. Maybe we could do that in our neighborhoods, in our small territories. At the same time, of course, we need to change the structure. At the same time, we need to come up with our own ideas and narratives, right? So I think that it's more about that, like change in the perspective, in how we produce knowledge, how we act, how we organize in the face of this crisis that will affect us, like sometimes differently, sometimes in the same way, but the future is challenging. So this is also, I think, that part of how we're dealing with it from the ground.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so because nature was also reminding us, it's kind of like 2 hours into the panel. Come on, guys. I mean, you heard the wind. It was speaking to me, and it said that actually. So of course I'm joking. But anyways, like before I give the questions, what? Oh, Mirko, hello. Hello. He's gone now. Yeah. Hey, ole.
But sve da. I'll just echo basically. I'll just say that it's really about opposing all forms of domination, really, and working at all levels. And the knowledge question is really, I mean, in our case, it's the climate depth, the degrowth, and all that was said really resonates with what's happening in the north, and I think in southeast, the Balkans, from what I know. But also, just for our context, I'll just add one tiny thing that actually I think it implies like an honest, continuous, it's ongoing, but honest and serious collective relearning and unlearning of knowledges from specifically, I would say, what social self-management, but like specifically self-management, and also traditional common practices. Because I just mentioned one of the aspects, because it's, we tend to think about it as an economical thing, but actually the core of it, that was kind of obviously never really at all realized at the national level, regional, but not even at a household level, like on the level of gender relations in so-called social self-management Yugoslavia. I mean, the self-management was actually like a total politicization, politics that actually implied the actual dissolution of the state by the end of it. It was the taking of the power and responsibility by all of us. And however, also correcting this, like, these massive gaps also with the fact that actually we need to deal with the rights of nature and all the other beings. And so, in the fact, law and politics is possibly, like, as Ramón said, is the conjunction, because in law we can discuss these things better than in economy. There is, like, with, ecocide and so forth. And also really being humble in the fact that which is really scary, but in the view of the climate crisis and the amount of CO2 we have today in the air, it's never happened in I don't know how many millions of years. Actually, knowledges that are the most solid, the most grounded, are actually shifting, and it's just going to require a lot of. It's just organizing. Yeah.
Okay, organizing.
So thanks. I'll yeah.
That's a good point.
Self-organizing.
That's a good point.
I'll leave it to the floor now. I'm sorry. I'll listen, but I'll need to catch the next connection. I'm really sorry. We'll continue, but I'll be listening. So, I won't be able to.
Material reality is primary, so it's okay. So, Mirko, before I give the questions to you, by the way, I actually wanted to say something similar to Mirko. So, okay, you're here, so that's good. So, anyways, like, of course, some of you who know me know that I'm a vulgar Marxist, this very stupid classical guy that kind of like, but it's all, and okay, maybe like in 20 years, if they pay me like a little bit more, like for 20 euros more, I would be okay with that. So anyways, like, but I actually have a fucking good story about it. Like 2 years ago, before the pandemic, I was called to go to Belgium and to do music for a theater play on the end of capitalism. and it's like quite interesting how that went. It was, of course, as you can imagine, very fucked up. So we were like transported to Ostende, which is this beautiful, like country. We talked about it yesterday, yeah. So, and she was living there, by the way. We didn't know each other, and yeah. So I was in this recording studio, and you like people were like debating the end of capitalism, and of course it's like 20 leftists from all parts of the world. It was hell, to be honest. It was the worst 10 days of my life. It's like completely chaos. Nobody agrees with anything. Like all of it. But there's this alternative and this alternative. It's like my alternative is better, and it's like. I wanted to go basically and just like make music, and in the end they canceled the play. So, but this is a true story, and there are actually recordings of our debates there. And I thought, with these guys, we should do like actually a play on that, like why the play on the end of capitalism actually got canceled because we couldn't agree, what was the end of capitalism gonna look like. But a very very good point I learned from a psychologist. So this is a theater group, and there was this guy called Dominique Villard, so a Belgian psychologist who is leading this group, and they work with prisoners, they work with juvenile offenders, drug addicts. I mean, they're this very crazy theater. They're not your usual srpsko narodno pozorište, so to speak. And anyways, like he told me, Alexander, like okay, there are many problems with the left, but the left is too cerebral. We're here, we constantly like thinking, and like when you ask like, okay, so what are you pushing for? It's like, of course you're gonna say, well, this and this, and he's like, the entire left is too cerebral. We're here, but you know what? Like we should experiment more, and that's actually the fucking idea, and that's like why I agree with Mirko. Organize, and like I think listening to Ramón. There was also a very beautiful idea that occurred to me, like regarding Yugoslav self-management, because that's where I come from. That's like also what I research. I mean, I also researched Marxist centers in Yugoslavia, which did ecological research. Anyways, it was very interesting when you were talking about self-organizing, that people think it's kind of like, yes, we go to our garden and then we do something, and then autonomy. So of course it's a bit complicated. If all of us would actually go to the National Assembly of Serbia, and now we throw away Vučić, goodbye Vučić, thank you for everything, and we make a workers' assembly, what are we going to do? So then, you start to experiment, and then you will have to actually see, how we support and protect the environment and the people within it. I mean, I know there's a new constitution in Chile, we can talk about it in the discussion, but I thought, maybe in the future when we start to experiment, maybe some new form of self-management, like ecological self-management would have to take place, because A, it's experimental, B, it actually, how you say, you have to face your own conditions. It will not be the same everywhere. So, people who don't have a river, of course, don't have to self-manage a river, but those who do must. So, these ideas that kind of stick with us. And then eventually, when you go into practice, you would have to form, and some form of self-management would have to happen, and it would not have to be this pre-capitalist told, in my village there was this zbor or something like that, or what was it, the Ejidos or Ejidos, yeah, in Chile, and Baldios in Portugal. So these old forms, but we would actually need to know how to, ruin a bank, close the stock exchange, close the National Assembly, and close all the banks and all the car industries, and in the end, just like say, fuck you to lithium. So, and you need a workers' assembly to do this, and democratically elect, and fuck you to lithium. So, anyways, I want to end up with this, and give you the floor for the questions. And thank you for listening. Us, we're probably super crazy, and 2.5 hours, I wouldn't listen to myself, to be honest. So the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I am Milica from University of Belgrade, Faculty of Geography. So I have a question. Hello. I have a question for all of you. It's not an easy question, but be prepared. If we want to have a successful this kind of initiatives, we need to have public support. How to get such a big public support if we, for example, have this kind of propaganda on the other side, like politicians and people on ruling places, they always say we have to have higher salaries, we have to have a higher economical development, we need those materials, lithium or any kind of other resources, because we need to have mobile phones, we need to have computers, we need to have cars, batteries, etc.
No, we don't. I'm willing to give up my computer. If
But
it means
okay, you and we are like minority, but general population, how to get them?
I think if you ask someone, do you want your food source or do you want your computer, I think they'd answer their food source.
I really do. I just don't think it's been presented, and I think it is media and it is marketing, and I'm going to come full circle to what I said in the beginning. Listen, if you put me, I really want someone in Australia to do this. I want to be in a live debate with Marnie Finlayson. She's in charge of the Rio Tinto project here. I'm an actor, and I will beat her on every point that she has to make about economic growth, about workers' rights, workers' pay, like on every level, even science. Dragana Đorđević is here from the Serbian Academy of Sciences, and her job is at risk because she's telling the truth. And thank you for being from the one university that got paid by Rio Tinto, I think 2 million euros, 1.5 million euros, for studies that we have not seen. Thanks for asking the question. It's great that students like you are there. Scientifically, economically, socially, politically, I can challenge every single thing that they've laid on the line. But their propaganda is amazing. It really does come down to that. That's my understanding of it. I mean, I'd love to hear from these guys, but it really comes down to marketing and propaganda. And when we had, and of course, right-wing nationalism, which is rising everywhere and getting, and self auto-censorship. So people now, in terms of protest, they're like, I got filmed at the last protest, or Clara got filmed at the last protest, I'm not going. And it's like, they don't need to film again for the next 20 protests, and people won't go because they don't want to get filmed. But the propaganda machine of it, I think, is really interesting. And like, we've talked about that in our team about, okay, what's the what propaganda do we use? You know, we've been looking at like old communist propaganda just because, you know, sentimental, you know. And it's also really good art. But I wanted to say something about my personal experience of the marketing strategies that like Rio Tinto uses. So like, they had that ad, but I think that there's something about, I can say this because I think I said it once publicly. I don't want to give away strategy. But that ad gave me a lot of hope because it showed me how much money they're willing to spend because their message isn't getting through and their money isn't working. And I think they're having a real problem with the community because the community won't sell. And so their greatest weapon, which is money, is not useful to them. And they don't know what the fuck to do. And so now they have to talk to the European Union, and then I go to a meeting with the ambassador for the European Union after Merkel came, and he asks me, why do you guys, what gives you the idea that the European Union supports this project? And I'm like, well, Merkel said this the other day, and like, then we released these documents, and then you said this, sir, you know, and I think I pulled out a comment where he supported the project. But I think, honestly, I think Serbia did an amazing job last year of public awareness. I think that that's growing. I think social media has a huge role to play. I think our awareness around social media is growing, how algorithms work. I think that's a really amazing space. We had a couple of problems. We had a channel shut down and then we got it reopened, and you know, things like that always happen. But I think your question was about how do you build civic like the mass.
Not just mass, but permanent support. We had massive protests in the beginning of this year, but how to keep that strong will and feeling that we have to continue this battle, not just for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, but permanent.
Can I ask you a question? Who do you think is responsible for that action? Like, who do you find responsible when you ask, how do we keep this momentum going? Who do you think is responsible for that momentum?
I'm asking you.
Yes. You're asking me?
Yes.
But are you asking me
all
who's
of
responsible?
You. All of you.
Yeah, of course you can. I'm just wondering who's responsible because I don't think
and
it's
just one question to give a microphone also. For example, what would you say if some people ask you, is there such thing like green mining? Can we really have that, or that is like just one kind of greenwashing? So because we have a lot of mining region in Serbia, not just west part of Serbia, we have eastern part traditionally, which are connected with minings. So also we have that kind of propaganda because whole cities are connected with those mines because their parents, brothers, sister, grandparents worked there. So how to explain to those people? I'm done.
I want to add something. Thank you. I think it's a very good question. Actually, the problem, I think we can see it from scales and in terms of time. Like, we're not gonna shut down like mining like immediately. Maybe here there's an opposition, but mining like as an activity that happens in the material world is gonna be there, right? And the demand for minerals. The thing about the computer, I'm not gonna renounce my computer because I need it. I work with it. It's a tool for my work.
We have to rethink work.
Thank you. And thank you. And I have the right to have a computer.
Well,
can I finish? Thank you. The problem with technology and the corporate capture of technology is that most of devices are programmed actually to be disposable and to be like useless in a couple of years. And it's not the problem of technology itself. We have the right to technology as peoples. We use it. Actually, we came here by planes. So I think that, yeah, we don't need to force anyone or to blame anyone or to make anyone feel guilty for using phones or computers. I don't think that's the right way. I think that we have the right to use it because it's the result of research, it's the result of common knowledge. Like all the technologies and all the companies that are making profit out of technology are using knowledge that used to be public. And it's hundreds or thousands of years of science. It's not the same as corporate science. So we need to differentiate that, I think. And that's why I think that your question is so interesting, because we can change that as well. We need to change like why we use technology, which kind of technology we use, for how long, how can we repair. Actually, there are campaigns and movements about on the right to repair, you know? So we could use the same phones for 10 or 20 years, our computers the same. We can still be like, you know, like making a good use of it, right? It's about the use, about the way, about how to produce. So I don't want to like demonize technology or to demonize computers or even transportation. I was in Berlin last weekend in this, also in this conversation with a group of artists, and they invited some activists and researchers, and somebody said something like, yeah, we should question ourselves if we really need to move to meet with people. And I say like the same, I have the right to move to meet with people. Why should I feel like guilty for coming from Chile to meet you or organizations? So it's my fault now that, you know, all the pollution from the, you know, the airplanes in the world, suddenly we are controlling ourselves and making ourselves guilty. I don't think that's the way. So, and also in terms of time, sorry, yes, immediate change, reduce our consumption, of course. We don't need to buy things all the time. Maybe none of us do it, right? There are some people that do, but maybe none of us. So I think that we should slow down consumption, usage of energy, and so on. But first, we need to regulate the activities that are still going to be there. We are not going to end with mining. We're not going to end with commerce. We're not going to end with these products. This will always be there. If I don't use my computer, I'm not going to change anything. Maybe I can do much more, like by fighting for controlling these industries, by controlling the production, by standardizing like the components. And this is something that is happening actually. And then recycling. Like I think that recycling and circular economy is more bullshit because the way it is done, not in principle, you know? So today less than 1% of lithium is recovered from batteries, right? But then today there is some discussion about it, about like how the batteries should be assembled and how research actually again should be conducted, not to produce and sell more, but in instead to sell less and to extract less. So it's about reducing, like shrinking and downshifting. And that's a progressive, I think, progress in towards what we want to reach. So thank you for the question. I think it's super important.
Yeah, maybe I wanted to. Yeah, sure.
Just to
Keep it short because
I will try.
this has been the most lovely audience so far, and I really want to see what they have to say.
Don't ask the woman to keep it short.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you,
No, but
Bojana. Thank
no,
you,
it's-
thank
no,
you,
no, it's,
thank you.
the Pablo.
Actually, thank you.
Pablo also closes
Because
soon.
because you can actually take planes to not take planes anymore. You can actually, just to answer like almost directly, you can actually use cell phones, so you don't have to use cell phones anymore. This is the way I at least deal with it, with contradictions, because to live in capitalism is to live in contradictions. So it makes no sense to blame each other and to make each other feel guilty. On that, I agree with you. But what is the limit of this thing that I have the right to own this and that and that? What is the limit? So when someone is going to say, but I have the right to have a single-use car. So what is the limit then? Once again, I understand what you were saying, Bojana, because we have the right to water usage. We have the right to feed each other. We have the right to housing. These are like, we have to, yes, think about scales, and I believe in that. For example, answering like directly to you, Portugal also has this mining tradition, so people are almost emotionally connected to it also, and we have to talk about scales for them to understand the big difference of the projects that they had in mind from the past and what is going to pass next if these projects are going to move forward. But I think that saying that we have these things that we are saying that we have the right to, I think we have to discuss them. We have to discuss what are our actual essential needs to move forward. So what I believe us as a species, as the human species, we should be doing now is some sort of curation to curate what are the things that we need to bring forth with us to the future and what are the things that we're going to leave in the past. And that can't be something that is decided individually, like I have the right to, technology, this. There are some basic needs that are for us and for the animals. Hello, we are mammals. We are mammals, and we live in a material world. And for our bodies to be sustained, we need water, we need food. So there are different levels of necessities, and we are going to have to be grown-ups, enough to sit down and to say, I'm sorry, you don't have the right for the single-use car. You don't. It's not a universal right. The universal right is access to water, is access to air that I can breathe. And sorry, it makes me really feel emotional, but it goes to the second part. We want to get the public, I agree with you. So for me, it's getting people to emotionally connect with this. Because people are being bombarded with information for 30 years and nothing happens. I am sick of signing petitions and doing marches. That's why I'm an Extinction Rebellion and I do civil resistance and civil disobedience. Because I don't believe it's going to get... things are going to change by the weapons that the system gives us. It has to be outside of legality that also, not only, but it has to be also outside of legality that we are going to do this. So one way for the people to emotionally connect is, for example, to see people that are being persecuted, and it's very easy for the public to understand these are not the bad guys. Why are they going after these people? These are not the bad guys. So for me, once again, once we start at this point, we have to re-signify what is the human experience. What are the things that matter and what are the things that don't matter? We had a pandemic. Would we survive without music? Would we survive without touching each other and without community? Would we survive, And even we can't, of course, say that we don't. I'm not a primitivist. I believe that we have to go forward with technology, not with this sense and this liberal and individualistic sense that I have the right to do this. I use cell phones, I take planes, but it's to destroy the system that created those things. And I'm okay with living in contradictions. The important thing is community, struggle, organize, 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 and also to stop with the sacrifice narrative. We are not going to get the public if we're going to constantly say, oh, the world is ending and we have to sacrifice all these things. No. We can deurbanize ourselves, we can get closer to nature, and then what do we find out? Wow, I don't need all these things. I can live in a different way. I can at least try, you know. I'm going to give you a personal example. I moved to the mountains and I'm closer to a community that shares my feelings and my values. And what I understand is the less I consume, the more the happiest I am, you know. And we have to sell this, not sell, but we have to give this to the public, you know, but it's true. We have to give this to the public as the truth that it is. It's not a sacrifice, it's a party. And it's coming back to the earth and to our own bodies and to our own communities. It's getting away from this feeling of separation. So this is my hope to you guys, and that both of you are correct, but let's leave the individualistic part as the part that we can leave behind. It's going to be a long journey, but let's at least try to do it.
That will be 20 euros. Yeah, so as I've said, yes, so this panel was part actually of a set of panels that's called ecological movements and social critique. So we didn't begin by lithium, but this was the most central one. Anyways, I'm just telling you this because, so far, this has actually been the best audience, and you know, we have people.
All get cigarettes.
Yes, 20 euros, everyone, 20 euros. So just kidding. But literally, we have people who are just staring and no. But you guys kept clapping and cheering and booing and just kidding, you didn't boo. But anyways, dude, what do you think? Are there any more questions? But okay.
Hey, great debate. Thank you very much. You went through a lot. I'm Mikhailo, I'm a journalist. I'm following the topics of green capitalism. Recently, past few months, writing on stories about it. And you went through, a lot. And you mentioned some alternatives and solutions. Okay, we found the problems, common problems in South America and Europe around. But the thing is, talking about alternatives, I think it's worth to mention. I don't know, Ramón, especially, I don't know if you came across in your research about land workers movement in Brazil, MST.
Yes.
And that thing, you mentioned Zapatistas and everything, but and we are talking about food sovereignty, about certain things, so I don't know if you can say a few words about it. I think it's worth to mention. Yeah. And one more thing about, for you, Lola, you mentioned voting. It was yesterday for green taxonomy in EU. So it was either or for gas and nuclear. It was either or. So if you're thinking about mainstream, what are the other options? I mean, okay, to vote against, but on the other hand, we are talking about this green extractivism, then we are leaving it all to a green extractivism on the other hand. So I think it's complex. It's not just to choose one or the other. It's more than that. So maybe, I mean, it's not a question, but just if you can short comment as well on that, then please.
Thank you. Well, the food sovereignty is a concept that was, I don't know if you know, that it was kind of installed in the discussion by La Vía Campesina, this international network of peasant movements and organizations, and it was actually kind of mostly my focus of work, activism and research before getting involved with lithium. I was actually really interested in this community water management in San Pedro de Atacama by the indigenous communities there. and how actually the in the Andes or in the Andes regions, in spite of all like the advance of the neoliberal agri-food systems, there still existed like these agricultural practices and the local food systems. And I actually in Europe I also worked with organizations and networks in southern Italy, in Sicily. So it was very interesting for me to see how these practices were common, also in a part of like southern Europe, but also in a part of in the Andean region in Latin America, and also traveling across other countries like in Asia or Middle East. I always found like the same practices, the same connection to the seeds, to the water, to the community. So I found like wow, this is like really common for everyone. Like and then La Via Campesina is actually a network that kind of like, well, actually the Movimiento Sin Teja, it's also a part of this network, right? So the interesting point, and I think it has to do with what everyone has said here in the panel, is that what we need to recover is the capacity to eat locally, what we want to eat more independently, of course, and this food has to be kind of like locally pertinent as well. Like we don't need to buy everything from the industry, right? We can eat locally and live well in most of the parts of the world. Now the conditions are changing, and this has a lot to do with what's going on, like at an international level, with, for example, the business of the patents, or the or the fertilizer industry. You mentioned the plastic. Actually, I also dedicated myself like several years, San Pedro Atacama, to fight plastic. It was a really like exhausting struggle.
The petroleum industry.
Yes, the petroleum industry.
Pays,
exactly.
Pays everyone.
And it's like the lobby when you want to change a little bit more the structure is like huge, and it's the same with the fertilizers, because with the green revolution that you mentioned, actually, this came, all these revolutions from the top actually come during crises. So this was a crisis of fertility of the soil, because of the exhaustion of the soils. Yeah, exactly. So and this is also connected to mining extractivism in Chile, because the first answer to this fertility crisis was the import of saltpeter, of nitrates, right? And exported mostly from Chile. It is in the origin of the war with Bolivia and Peru, by the way. And then it was used for actually the production of gunpowder. And one of the main producers was UK. So then in Germany, they invented, actually Nobel Prize of Chemistry, invented like the artificial or the synthetic, actually nitrate, which is the urea, right? It has like 46% of nitrate in it, and it kind of resolved the crisis of fertility, right, all over the world. And that's why we have like these huge production rates everywhere, artificially, of course. And this is also a factor that explained also the development of all the GMO crops and everything, right? So then, again, back to food sovereignty. I think it's the first perspective that was like not only like in the opposite of the Green Revolution, but it was a constructive proposal. And this concept of sovereignty opposes to the concept of food security that is being actually imposed by international institutions. So all the World Bank and all the institutions that you mentioned already, when they finance like agricultural development, is under this concept of food security, which is ensuring the access. It doesn't matter how it is produced. So that's why I think that it's so important to, out of this concept, how then the concept of energy sovereignty actually came up, and then energy, water sovereignty, and so on. And I think this is key today as a part of like the transition. Actually, there is also like a term. There is a term of agroecological transition, which is like recovering the practices, protecting the practices, and also like adapting new practices to this changing environment. So yeah, and I think that's it. Right? Pardon?
He needs some more.
Yeah, maybe I need to pass it. Yeah, thank you. But thank you for the question. Very interesting.
Okay, just like one small regulation, the camera is dead. We promised to leave the pub 1 hour ago, so I mean we have some small rules maybe like she needs to reply first, and then like maybe one or two very short questions, very short replies.
He might not even be answering.
Or no answer. So anyways, please, Lou.
Okay. Yeah, so I just would reply that if you followed it like deeply, you probably have, like in detail, you probably have more knowledge than I on this decision. All I wanted to say with this is like the governments, they are not really trying to find solutions, but they are like promoting different things so that the public is like, oh, okay, they're really trying to change something, so I do not have to care about it. So that's what I was trying to say with this example. And I would like to add like really quick my answer to the question before, because I think it's like a really big challenge, and I asked myself the question also a lot of times. And I think that right now, I think like solidarity is one of the things that we really need, and if people really experience what solidarity means, I think then they are empowered and really start to like be able to self-organize themselves. And I think that is really important to feel this empowerment that I am able to do something. And I think like solidarity, it's hard to create, but it needs like momentums where people then feel this solidarity. And I think for that, from my opinion, my way is to just keep trying and trying again with like different actions, as it is like talking to people or doing like blockades or whatever. There's so many different things, and that we have to try and try again to like create a momentum where people then feel this solidarity moment. And I think like it's really a big problem because we all live in different systems where the government is trying to control what is being thought, and in like different ways. And I think there's no complete solution to say, okay, what can we do? But yeah, just trying again and again to get people to solidarize. And I think about the green mining, I'm not an expert. I would say like we have to accept that all resources are endless, and we have to treat them like this way and share it equally with everyone who like needs it. So I think there's not going to be green mining as all resources are endless, but it's the way how we treat them, how we use them, where it can be okay in some way to use them. But yeah.
Okay, questions here.
Thank you, everyone. This was really amazing. So my name is Natasha, and I'm an artist, and I want to just make an observation that most of you are artists, which are also a lot of times marginalized throughout the world, and kind of my question comes from the position of an artist and cultural worker organizer that is very much invested in international solidarity and questioning the role of arts in it. So when you're talking about degrowth, moving away from capitalism, and also different liberation movements across the world, the question is also how, I'm asking, like, what is your experience of how art, is there a possibility of liberating art from capitalism? Because it's so tightly tied to the market and also institutionalized and absolutely integrated into the state structure and the tie between the state and capital. And what I'm seeing is that it's very difficult to, well, going back to the comment about experimentation and the lack of experimentation, where in the reality is, like, if we think of degrowth, come from the position of thinking that we're in a place of abundance and not a place of lack. And the arts actually, the strategies within within the artistic strategies, there is also regeneration, transformation, and the possibility to build communities and to sustain communities. So I'm just curious to hear some of the examples that you've directly seen that liberating art or like practicing art collectively and producing knowledge through those strategies collectively have changed you or changed you in your own communities.
Okay, so before you answer, I was told we have like 2 more minutes, so like.
She's a poet.
But you're an actress, so it's between the two, but...
You do a minute, I'll do a minute.
Okay, good. So, I truly believe that is also, for example, just to reformulate, Netflix, for example, is one of the biggest contributing to emissions, one of the companies that is most contributing to emissions. So we also have to decapitalize, decolonialize, and patriarchalize arts also. And for me, once again, the answer is community. How can I bring my art without being in the flexes of consumption, for example? For me, it has been to dedicate myself more or to say yes to projects that have an ecological or that are connected to the rurality or that are land-based, that I can install my art in the place. And I also, as a consumer, I don't want to be so much a consumer of culture, you know. I want to be an agent, and I have to be conscious that I am an agent of culture also by what I choose to consume or not. So once again, as we resignify the human experience, I think we will be able, once again, to be happy in a group, theater group, community theater group. We talked about this. To work again with the community.
My side of it too. You can just keep going. It's
Yeah,
good. It's great.
No,
No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
Okay, so we can enjoy again to see a fellow neighbor to dance, and that because we are also being taught what is good and bad art. We have also been taught that we can't make art because it's not good enough, because there is not the validation of some academy or some academy award or some, so we truly have to, once again, go back to our bodies, go back to our creative experiences, and as Audre Lorde and all these wonderful black feminists would tell us, to get back to the erotic, The erotic not as the pornographic, but the erotic, yes, the erotic as the will, the power, the will to live in our bodies, and the right to live in our bodies.
Cheila, this is 20 euros.
Really? Okay.
The fella has a question, so...
No, we're done. You said 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's like the idea, she has a question, but no one...
Did I leave something uncovered,
Okay.
Bojana? Okay.
No, like I want to give her the question because she didn't ask, but the idea is no one can answer, so please.
Go Rafael.
I'm from Portugal too. I came from an affected area where my grandmother lives right now. I really appreciate like this old talk, but it's kind of getting to my heart, the feeling that we are not talking about communities that are completely isolated, that have that are like in extinction almost. They are like villages, really small villages that have like a really amount of forest that are going to extinct. There's no forest plate in the Portugal government, and what I see in the future that I see, and the older people see, is like fire everywhere, because Portugal is really affected by fires. And the other thing that I see is that a plan for like isolating even more villages, so that wind power, solar power can be built, so that more minings can be built. And this is like really sad, because people can resist. They don't have the culture, they don't have the education, they don't have like the feelings to construct, the fight, the struggle. And for me, it's deeply sad. To me, to sometimes don't have the tools to help people, help my family, help my friends that are living there, because they born and grow in a culture that they have to migrate, that they have to work, that they lose their parents, that they didn't have anything, or they don't even have food, and it's like really deep, and I really need like advice and how to build stuff and how to like put these people cheering up and thinking that they really have some kind of hope.
Rafaela, thank you. I mean, I actually have a proposal. Like, instead of answering, we can actually do this communally and actually continue answering this. We have a bar with the drinks because we are at one, and also this is, you know, since this was attacked by fascists, as I told you, a form of kind of solidarity, that I invite you to stay here to discuss this and to, you know, hang out with these people here, because this is also a self-organized pub, and also the idea was to bring you all together. You know, it's less, you know, important what we discussed, it's more important that we're here together, and so actually, I agree with that, yes. But I wanted to make, okay. So, anyways, like,
Let her do the poetry.
Okay, I'll let her. So, anyways, so I mean, we're actually coming tomorrow to Belgrade to do this press conference regarding this other declaration, which you can ask us after this. And we will return to Novi Sad on the 13th of July with another lecture where you can join us by Vedran Horvat, and he will be talking about the political ecology in the Balkans in the last 20 years. But you know, you can follow us on social media. You have all of these small flyers, and you can like take one badge and put it here, and then you know you will be happy. So thank you, guys, for people for staying this long with us, and to the participants, it was great. Mirko said it was great, so you know he messaged us. So please grab a drink and see you. Thanks.